for those of you who are not familiar with ClientSuccess, or you're just getting familiar with ClientSuccess, we are a customer success management platform and more. Historically, we have been a solo platform, really helping customers, what we said, manage from new to renew, so that entire post-initial sales life cycle. But we are so much more than that. Over the past several months, if you've been following our journey, we've had a series of acquisitions, including one of my personal favorites, Baton. If you're not familiar with Baton, it is an onboarding solution, but so much more. I do encourage you, if you are somebody who leads onboarding, whether it's in your customer success function, you're part of an implementation team, take a peek at it. You will not be disappointed. We have been moving folks over to our solution for the past several months now, and the feedback is fantastic. So if you're interested in learning more about Baton, you can go ahead and scan that QR code. It will bring you to some more information and get a demo scheduled. So if you are interested, I definitely recommend you go check it out. Now, last week I introduced this, but for those of you who are not familiar, every September, ClientSuccess hosts the CS100 Summit. This is a community event. So this is not a customer event for ClientSuccess, meaning you do not need to be our customer to attend this event. In fact, quite the opposite. Majority of the folks that do attend are just community professionals, practitioners, leaders who want to come, build relationships, and learn amongst their peers. If you have not familiarized yourself with this event, I encourage you to head over to clientsuccess.com and go and check it out. But this will be this September 22nd through 24th. Now, just to give you a little kind of preview into this, I think I have one more speaker that I'm left to confirm, but we have fantastic speakers already secured for this year from brands like Atlassian, Zendesk, Canva, Notion. I mean, the lineup is really, really fantastic. So I do encourage you, if you do plan to attend, that you register soon. Now, the reason why it's called CS100 is because it is limited to 100 attendees. This is not a big conference. This is an intimate leadership event. And so you can expect to not only learn, but kind of build your network of peers and practitioners who you're going to lean on for the rest of your career. It is a fantastic event. Now, I do stress this is a leadership event. So if you are in a people leadership role, this is the event for you. If you are currently an IC, it's probably not going to be in line with what you would need and what you would expect. So I'm just asking that if you're a leader, go check it out. If you're an IC, maybe put it on your things to check out in the future list. But it is a fantastic event. It takes place at Sundance Resort in Utah. Talk to anybody who's participated or joined in the past, whether it be a speaker or an attendee. I promise you, you'll only hear rave reviews about it. We're going to be posting our speakers shortly. So like I said, we've just secured them. So we're going to be posting some of that on social as well as our website. So you can go and see who's going to be speaking. But again, we do limit it to 100 folks to register. So if you haven't registered yet and you are planning to come, just remember pricing is going to go up at the end of the month. Right now, we are still in our early bird pricing, which is available to the end of June. So please go check it out. Would love to have you guys there. Okay, so now for what you guys are all waiting for is our content and topic for today's session. So as I mentioned, my name is Kristi Faltorusso. I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at ClientSuccess. And for today's topic, we're going to be talking about designing your post-onboarding plan for real results. I'm going to dive in here, but really, the premise of this is, so many organizations are putting so much emphasis on onboarding, and it's been proven, right? You need to have a successful onboarding for your customers to ultimately be able to achieve success with your platform, with your services. But the challenge is that so often we focus on the onboarding and then there's kind of this messy middle. Now, when we look at a lot of stages, we'll talk about this, but we call it adoption, but I don't think that's really what's happening here. So we're going to dive in and talk about how do you optimize this for the ultimate experience, not only for your customers to better understand your product, its value, but more importantly, how to adopt it into their workflows and really drive change in their business. Now, I'm going to ask you guys a quick question. You can use the chat to answer this, but all I'm looking for here is an acknowledgement if this is something that your company is optimizing for. But what we see a lot of companies focus on is onboarding focuses on speed, right? You hear this like, we want a fast time to value, right? So it's like, how do we get them onboarded as quickly as possible? So if this is a sentiment that you've heard in your current organization or in another company, you've heard someone say, right, this fast time to value where we're optimizing for speed for our onboarding experience, just go drop a number in the chat just so I can kind of see, am I the only one that's been hearing this? Am I the only one that's been seeing this? Thank you. I appreciate you guys all now confirming that I'm not crazy. But companies can, yes, thank you, Allison, all day. But this is something that we see a lot of companies do, right? Is they're like, we need onboarding to go quickly, right? How do we make onboarding really fast? And I get it. Right. The intention isn't that we make a process fast, is what your leaders are trying to convey is that we want them to have a fast time to value. Okay. So I understand what we're trying to get to, but really that's not what the message says. Because the reality of it is, what you need to have happen is change. And guess what? Change takes time. You cannot speed that up, right? So when you see organizations say that they're optimizing for a sub 90-day onboarding or sub 30 days, or we need to get them up in 3 days, I mean, this is crazy. Yes, you can do that. You can get your customers stood up on your platform in days, some of you even minutes, right? That's not the heavy lift. And I talk to companies all the time who are like, yeah, we got our customers onboarded in 2 weeks and it's great. But then I'm like, why is adoption trash? Because the reality of it is that we're not focused on the right things. What we need to be focusing on is the behaviors that drive the adoption over time. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So here's the reality, right? Your customers, they didn't just buy software, they're committing to change, right? They're talking about this when they make this purchase. Now, I'm not saying that is the reality that you're experiencing when you kick off with your customers, or even when they go through onboarding, or even after that. But when anybody purchases software, right, the intention is that they want to do something different than they're doing today. At least that's what they're saying. And so it's our job to help them change how their team operates. Because at the end of the day, you can have a customer who is logging into your platform, who is using certain features, but they haven't fully changed how they work around your product. And that's the thing that we need to optimize for. And again, that takes time. So we're not talking about how do you optimize the 30-day onboarding process. So this is the reality. In fact, you won't be able to do this in onboarding. Onboarding should continue to be, how do we get them set up on the platform? How do we get everything integrated? How do we get the platform configured in a meaningful way? But if we don't understand that the change management that's required to go alongside of this cannot happen in that same window, we have to be intentional about driving that home after onboarding closes. And honestly, this is where most of the churn starts. And it's not with bad onboarding, it's unmanaged changed. So I don't know about you guys, but we often see, because again, at ClientSuccess, we do get to work with our customers who are running programs, right? And one of the things that they do is they track the churn reasons. And we do too at ClientSuccess. We use our reason codes to understand, well, why are customers doing certain things, or what are we hearing? What are we seeing? What are they saying? And the reality is we see a lot of folks attribute churn to poor onboarding. But now, again, the reality is that the onboarding wasn't bad. It was that the customers never changed their behaviors to fully adopt your solution to drive the value they discussed. It's not the onboarding. Now, listen, I'm not saying it's never the onboarding, because I've also seen some pretty messy and bad onboardings, but it's not just the onboarding, right? It's what happens after. Now, I don't know about you guys also, but what we see is that there is this like story arc where you have this customer journey that suggests that, yes, we're going to have our customers go through this kickoff, we're going to have a really good onboarding, and the next stage in our journey is adoption, and we're going to talk about that. But that is just not what we're doing. You've got so many customer success managers who are just kind of like waffling through the journey until the next big thing or milestone happens, which unfortunately for most is either a business review or the renewal. So the first thing I'm going to challenge you all to do is just understand, do you know what your data is suggesting? Now, when I say this is, do you understand how to identify when your customers have fully changed their workflows and included your platform into how they do business? Now, the first thing I'd say is like, are there certain metric thresholds that suggest adoption? Now, in this case, there might be certain things like, our favorite example to use is Slack always had a number that said the minute somebody sends a certain number of Slacks, right, they ultimately became a Slacker, and they knew the product was very well adopted. So I'm going to challenge you guys to think, are there certain metrics or thresholds that suggest really strong adoption? Is that something you can dial into? Does the use of certain products suggest longevity? Now, this is something also interesting. We know that in most solutions, right, there's probably a core feature or two or some functionality that you know if your customers really, really embed that piece of your product into their workflow, it becomes disruptive, right? They need it, they rely on it. It is part of how they do business, and that ultimately might keep them as a customer longer. So, is there a product in your suite, in your tool set that you know if your customers really integrate that, that they are going to be customers for life? Does the user percentage suggest greater value realization? Now, this is something else. We see a lot of companies that purchase products and they distribute licenses. Maybe those folks go through training and enablement, maybe they don't. But is there a certain threshold that says when your customer users get to a certain percentage where they are daily active users in your solution, is that your magic number, right? Is that the thing that suggests, yes, our customers have fully adopted this? They are doing work, they rely on our platform to be successful. And the last one is, are there certain workflows that suggest a deeper integration? And when I say integration, I don't mean an integration of tools, I mean integration into their work, right? Their workflow, their day to day. Now, these are four things. These are four prompts that I would suggest you to use. And I'm going to give you some context as to why I'm asking this, because recently, and the reason why this had come up is at ClientSuccess, we were doing a deep analysis against our users. And so what we started to do is look at all of our customers who renewed and all of our customers who churned to start to see what were the behaviors of these customers. And then obviously take all those learnings and apply it to our current customer base to see, okay, well, are any of these customers at risk because they're not doing the things that good customers do? Or are they demonstrating behaviors of customers who are highly likely to churn? Now, we did this analysis, honestly, using I think it was the plus version or not the first version of ChatGPT, the first paid one, like the higher one. So I think it's like $60 a month. We were using that version of it to just go through all of this data to understand what are all of these signs and signals. And so we did a deep analysis here, and it started to raise a lot of interesting, I wouldn't say concerns, but definitely a lot of interesting points for us to go dive deeper into. And so we were able to layer that in because the things that we had made assumptions around, honestly, they weren't wrong, but they were off. And so that's the interesting thing we were able to find with this data. So I'm going to ask you guys, instead of making assumptions of what you think good looks like, or what you think are your top adopted features or functionality, or what you think these thresholds on usage and adoption are, I'm going to challenge you to go back and maybe do some sort of analysis on your own. And it doesn't need to be in an AI solution. You probably, maybe some of you have a BI tool that you're using where all of your data is ingested. But start to really profile your customers against these things, because this is where you start. You cannot manage your customers towards things that are not clear for you all, right? What are we working towards? You have to have a clear goalpost. So for us, now we have some clarity around what are the things that we need our customers to be doing in the technology in order to signal to us that this is a fully integrated part of how they run their business. Now, each of you are going to have a different solution, right? Some of you might say, well, my customers only need to use our product once a quarter because they use it for some analysis they do. Or we have a research platform. And so, they're using it to do research, and it could be a lot this month, could be a little. But what are the actual outputs, right? There is data and there is interaction with your solution that suggests that they're going to stay, that they're going to grow, that they are getting value. And so I'm going to challenge you to go deeper and start to figure out what are those things instead of relying on assumptions. Now, I was alluding to this earlier because most of you, maybe some of you, maybe, I don't know, have a customer journey in place, or we would at least hope so. And your customer journey may include some or all of these stages in the journey, right? And so we over-index on onboarding. Then most of us have a stage in our journey that says it's focused on adoption. And you may have something that focuses on some commercial growth. That could be expansion, upsell, cross-sell. You may have a renewal stage. You may have an advocacy stage. These are very common in customer journeys. Now, again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. You could have 3 stages, you could have 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm not here to tell you what your journey looks like. But what I do want to focus for a minute on is that second stage that we have here on the slide, which is called adoption. Now, What often happens with a lot of companies is, again, we put a lot of emphasis on onboarding. But the minute onboarding is done, whether the CSM is managing onboarding or not, does not matter. But the minute that onboarding door closes, our behavior changes. It's almost designed intentionally that we like sit back, right? And now it's like, oh, okay, we're very cavalier. Great, you went through onboarding, you had your training, you guys went through these modules, you watched the things. You should be able to drive value from the product now. I'll check back with you in 30 days and we'll do a check-in, right? Or I'll check back with you in 90 days and we're going to have an EBR or a QBR. These are standard motions in the adoption stage. But I'm going to challenge you to say your first year customer journey shouldn't look like this. Your adoption stage needs to be way, way, way more intentional, and it has to be focused on those magic metrics that I just talked about. So, for example, some of the changes that we're making here at ClientSuccess are going to be the post 90 days after onboarding. So, for us, onboarding can be fast, it can be slow, it really does depend. But we would say on average, we're looking at probably anywhere from 75 to 90 days, depending on our customers, their infrastructure, resources, all of those things. But then what we would do is we would have them go into their regular recurring cadence of engagement with their CSMs, which is fine, or so we thought. What we're now doing is redesigning this program such that we will continue the weekly cadence of engagement with our customers for the 90 days following onboarding, with a very intentional framework around change management. Now, this is not more feature function conversations, right? It's not configuration, it's not onboarding. It's more, what are the specific use cases that are tied to their goals that we can help them start to adopt? And you've got to deliver it in bite-sized pieces, guys, because, right, we cannot data dump on these customers and expect them to do everything day one. So we're being very intentional about how we are scripting the 90 days after onboarding, complete with what are we engaging with them on? How are we continuing to keep their goals at the forefront, but also understanding that certain behaviors need to be demonstrated in order for them to prove that they are fully adopting. This is not, did they get value? Did they achieve a thing? I'm not looking for the ROI here. Again, this is really, really focused on the change management aspect. So what can we do to help guide them? Now, in our case with our platform, reporting is big, right? It could be certain insights, could be running certain playbooks, it could be engagements with their customers. Those are things that we want to help guide our customers along to say, okay, great. We know that if our customers, we have a product called Pulse, if they set their pulse for every single one of their customers and update the pulse every 30 days and have that as the regular cadence where this data is current, it's accurate, right? It's refreshed, it's got the notes included. And we know that it's being integrated into one of their channels, let's say Slack or Teams. Clearly, I'm not a Microsoft shop. So whether it's going to Slack and Teams, and then is the leadership team looking at this? Are they running their business on these metrics? These are the types of things that I'm going to be looking for. Again, it's not, let me show you how to use this thing. They learned that in onboarding. We want to say, what are the behaviors and how can we coach you to use this in your day-to-day so you're getting value over time? But the reality is that's what it takes, right? It does take time. And that's why we're being clear that this is not a one-shot conversation. It is something that we're trying to map out prescriptively for these customers following onboarding. Now, what I'm going to also say is that you need to consider your options because there, again, I always say this, it depends, right? But there's not a one size fits all for this framework. Now, some of you might think, you know what? We're going to just extend our onboarding. We have the bandwidth, our team has the capacity, and our onboarding managers, they're very well equipped to drive change management. That might be the case, right? You might just say, onboarding is going to look a little different. We're going to augment it. First part of onboarding is going to include, product integrations, configuration, basic training enablement, and then change management. And so instead of saying that onboarding is going to be 90 days, maybe it's 120 days, right? It's 150 days, whatever it needs to be. So that way you can include some regular change management and kind of coaching with your customers to make sure that this is being well adopted. That is one option. The next option could be you know what? It's going to go from onboarding, it's going to go to the CSMs because onboarding is kind of this machine, right? We got to get customers in, we got to get them out. We don't staff resources so that the customers can stay in there that much longer. I get that. We may not be optimized for that. So if your CSM is going to handle that, what does that look like? It cannot be this, like, again, reactive state where it's like, oh, okay, well, if and when my customers need me, I'll be here. It can't be that, at least not initially. You can eventually probably move back to a more relaxed cadence. But if you're going to have your CSM run that, you have to have a specific plan. And we have to have the right metrics to measure to know that the plan is working. Because the work doesn't matter if the change isn't happening. Now, the other thing is, I did a post on LinkedIn about this yesterday, and there was a really interesting point that came up in the comments, but somebody talked about the fact that they actually have a dedicated change team. So once the customers come out of onboarding, they have a dedicated team that works with their customers through change management. And it's driven by their education team, and it is really, really focused on use cases and that adoption flywheel that they're trying to get their customers on. I thought that was brilliant. I know that not all of us have that luxury. I certainly do not have that luxury. I don't have endless resources. I don't have the budget right now to staff a full team on that. But if that is something that your product requires, maybe that is something to consider. Now, again, things are going to come into play, right? Do you have a complex enterprise solution? Do you have big ticket customers who are spending a lot? Maybe that investment really makes a ton of sense. Whereas some of you might have a less complex product. Maybe it's more configurable, not as difficult. So it's not a heavy lift. You don't need a designated team. Your CSMs are well equipped to do that. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is once you get your metrics in place, you're figuring out who's going to run this, who is ultimately responsible for this change to happen, and how are we benchmarking against it. The next thing I'm going to encourage you guys to do is build out a post-onboarding roadmap. Now, as specific as we are with onboarding, and I got to tell you guys, the cool thing that I get to see is what onboarding looks like for a lot of companies, right? Because again, ClientSuccess, we work with a ton of our customers. Many of them are running their onboarding programs out of Baton, one of our newest products, or out of ClientSuccess, one of our success cycles. And so we see what onboarding looks like. I gotta tell you guys, so many of you are nailing it. It's so prescriptive, it's so right. You're focused on the right things. You've got great content. You've got great time allocated to these things. The sessions are well thought out. The work that you have your customers doing in between the sessions you're meeting, it's brilliant. So I see really successful onboarding programs designed. But again, there's nothing that says this is what happens after onboarding. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is start with the first one, which is mapping out your objectives, right? What are those use cases? What are the workflows that your customer has to adopt? You have to be crystal clear on the what, because if not, you can't figure out how. So that is your first step, is what is it that we're seeking our customers to do in our solution and in their day-to-day so that we can help them be successful. The second thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to assign the resources. If you don't have a designated team, you really just have to be thoughtful. Okay, are there at least things that my CSMs can do differently? Is there content that we can create? Can we do videos? Can we write things out? Can we create a guided experience in our knowledge base? I recognize that we don't have people sitting around in our companies doing nothing. I get that. And I also recognize that we don't have endless budgets to go hire more people. So what I'm suggesting here, there are varying degrees of how we're going to manage this. I don't suggest that if you don't have the resources that you do nothing, because something is better than nothing. So assign your resources, figure out who do we have and what can they do. Then I'm going to ask that you build out your frameworks the same way that you have playbooks for onboarding and that structure. Create something that allows whoever is managing this program and this process to have something that is going to guide them through this, because we do need some frameworks so we're all on the same page. Now, something that I'm really big on is consistency. I love for all of my customers to have a consistent experience. It allows us to make sure that what we are doing, we can measure that it's working. Now, I'm not saying that everyone's a robot and says and does the exact same things, but we generally have a sense of like, this is what we're covering, this is what we're working towards, these are the metrics we're managing. That allows us to measure the impact and the success of these programs. If everyone on your team is doing something completely bespoke, it is really tough to understand what's working and what's not. And that's why these types of frameworks really help. The next thing I'm going to say is you've got to set expectations and a communication plan, not just internally, while that is important. What I'm talking about here is explicit to your customers. If you have a customer who's coming into the partnership, right, and they know that they're going to go through onboarding, and they assume that when onboarding is done, they can scale back and that they're kind of left to their own devices. If that is not going to be the case, you need to set those expectations earlier in the partnership. Perhaps it's in your kickoff call. Perhaps it's even when your sales team is talking to your customers and saying, hey, listen, we have two parts to how we ensure your long-term success. You're going to go through onboarding for 90 days, and then we have basically a change management orchestration that we're going to walk you through for 90 days following. And that's to make sure that you're getting the most from the platform that you've configured and that it's really well integrated into your business and into your team. Set the stage. Talk to them about what that looks like. Now, why this is also important. You're asking for your customers' time commitment. It's not lost on us also that it's not just our time that needs to be accounted for, right? It's our customers as well. So we have to be aware that your customers, they have to be bought into this. They have to want to do the change. Change is hard. People are resistant to it. I recognize also that a lot of people that we're working with are not the people that purchase the product, which means they might not be as on board as the person who signed the check. I get that. So if you set expectations before the deal closes or right on the onset in the partnership kickoff, you leave less room for things to fall off. Now, I'm not saying that that will never happen. We see people ghost us all the time and deprioritize things all the time. I get that. That's always going to be a reality, sadly. But the faster and the sooner you can get ahead of it, the better off you'll all be. And then lastly, you need to have some way to report on this, right? You have to be able to manage and measure what it is that you're doing and the impact of that. So, like I said, if we're at ClientSuccess and our focus is we really want to help our customer because they said visibility around risk is important. We need to make sure that they are adopting certain features into their workflow. One of them would be Pulse. One of them might be our success cycles, right? So, for example, if a customer is set at a severe risk Pulse, what are the plays that they're running against it? That is going to show an integration into their workflow. If they're using the platform that way, it shows that they understand what this does to support the work they need to do. You need to connect those dots, but more importantly, you have to have the visibility to manage it. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, the next thing you're gonna have to do is determine the cadence of engagement. Now, I see a lot of teams basically either move to ad hoc. I've seen some folks that they go from onboarding to quarterly, they move to biweekly, monthly. That's okay. But when you're trying to operate through this change management, the cadence is going to be important, right? Because you want to get them to continue to do things daily, right? Or at least weekly, because we want to start to see that change happen, those behavior shifts. So how do we get this integrated into their workflows? This is going to be really interesting. So what is the appropriate cadence? Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and I'm going to say I would want to meet with my customers weekly. That is just for me. That is what makes sense for our product. What makes sense for our team is that when our customers come out of onboarding, I want to meet with them at least once a week. This allows me time to look at the data, right? To see how are they using the platform? Is it really in line with how they are defining value? Are they using it in a way that directly correlates? And then if not, how am I coaching them the next time we meet to make sure that that is happening? Cadence is first, right? So are you moving to weekly, biweekly, monthly? What is your plan? Do you set the cadence or do you allow your customers to determine it based on their schedule? This is something I put on here because while I love the intention that so many CS teams have, at the end of the day, we have to allow our customers to have a voice and say, this is what's appropriate for us. You might have a customer come on board, they are gung-ho, they are so excited. All of a sudden, big shift in their business, this is deprioritized. You can't make the mandate of somebody to say, you have to meet with us weekly. You have to be flexible. So just consider your customers' needs and where they are and meet them there. Now, why this is important is your plan might have to be augmented based on what they can allow for in their schedule. Okay? You might be doing weekly work. You might have a plan that says, here's what we're going to do because we're going to meet weekly. But then what we might find is that your customers actually, because they can't do that, your plan might not work. So how can you change your plan? How can you change that visibility? Now, it could be, you know what, my customer can't meet weekly, but I can send them updates every few days. I can send them at least a weekly recap and say, hey, Bob, Mary, here's what I'm seeing, right? Here's what's happening in the platform. I know last time we talked, here's what you said was most important. These are usually the things that we see our customers adopting in the workflow, and give them examples. Send them a Loom video. Keep them engaged. Keep your product top of mind. Just because they are not meeting with you doesn't mean that you can't share information with them, that you can't communicate asynchronously with them. So don't let the meeting cadence be your crutch. Don't let that prohibit you from the work that needs to be done. Make sure, again, this is why the data is so important. If you have that, you can go and share it proactively. And then you need to figure out, how long do we keep this accelerated cadence going? Because if you are moving to, let's say, weekly, I don't presume that we can all just meet with every single customer we have weekly in perpetuity. That just doesn't work. It doesn't scale, right? That's not lost on me either. So you have to figure out, and this is going to take some testing, guys. So like, I don't have the magic answer for you right now. I don't have the magic answer for myself yet. But how long is it going to take? Is it that you need to do this for 30 days? Do you need to do this for 90 days? Does it take 6 months? I don't know the answer. You'll all have to try to figure that out. But what I will say is that once you do get a sense of how long it's going to take for your customers to really fully change how they work, to incorporate your product and your solution into their workflow, that's what you want to start basing that off of, right? So if it takes 60 days, great. Then you're going to tell your customers, you know what? We have seen success running this program with our customers for 60 days. We'd love to do this with you. Can you commit to 60 days? That's basically 2 months. We're going to ask you to meet once a week. That is 8 meetings. Are you comfortable with that? Right? Pull them into the process. Let them determine what is appropriate for them, but also give them the social proof. Tell them, customers who give us 60 days post onboarding to really work with them through the change management in their business have a higher propensity to achieve their ROI in less time, right? Whatever the data is that you start to collect, whatever you get as that story arc, that's what you're going to do, because that'll nail it, right? Because everyone loves social proof. Tell me, customers that have done X are going to have a higher propensity of being successful by Y. Can I get you on board with that? Is that a program that you'd like to deploy in your business? You also have to give your customers the ability and option to opt out. While this might be what we want to do, and this might be what is needed to do to drive success, your customers might not care. You also might have customers who don't need it, who just get it. Maybe they are boomerang customers. They have used your product before in the past, and they're like, you know what, Kristi, I love you, love your team, don't need this now. We're good. We'll come back to you if we think that this is something that's important for us. That's cool, but watch the data. If the data tells you, hey, Mary, Bob, I know you said that this was going to be great and you got this and your team was going to be all over it, I'm actually seeing the data is telling me a different story here. I would love to revisit this program to see if we can help you. These are all things that you can have. These are perfectly fine and valid conversations to be having with your customer. And it's okay to call them out for not doing the things that they should be doing. At the end of the day, we are customer success managers. They cannot be successful with our products if they are not fully adopted. Okay, next thing is automating without losing humanity. I, again, get that we cannot do everything, right? We ourselves are limited, even in a world with AI doing as much as it is, or as much as it can. So let's think about certain things that you can automate, right? First off, if you have an LMS in place, that is awesome, good for you, amazing resource. So if you have a learning management system in place, how can you start to use that effectively? Maybe there are learning paths that you're designing. Again, it's not around feature and functionality. So the content that you're going to have for this program will be different than your onboarding. This is around use cases. This is around value realization, right? What are the actual things that they do? You're going to talk about it through the lens of their job. And then how do you weave in your product into the work that they're already doing? That is the content we're talking about. But if you've got an LMS, Weave that in between your one-on-one meetings. That's an amazing resource. If you don't have an LMS, let me just tell you, you can hack something together in Google Sites with Loom or Zoom. You can create some video content, drop it into a Google site, create some pathways. Promise you, you can do it. I did it. I built a Google site for our customers. We created a very, very cool onboarding portal about, I guess, like 3 years ago now. It helped us while we were working through our tech stack and building out some cooler things. So do not let technology be your blocker. There's too many free resources. You've got to be super, super creative. But if you have an LMS, use it. If you don't have an LMS but would love this idea, there are creative ways to do this at no cost, no additional cost. Okay, how do you automate the admin work? Email, follow-up, task management. Guys, this is really important. This is where AI comes in so strong. And if you're using a CSP like ClientSuccess or something else, there is a lot of automation that can be deployed. There are more call recording tools in every meeting that I go to than people. Okay, so I know you're all recording your calls. So how do you use the call recordings to do follow-ups, to summarize things, to set up tasks? All of that stuff should be automated. If you're not using some basic tools, there are plenty of free options out there as well. There are like freemium ones where you don't get the full suite of what the functionality is, but you get something, and something is better than nothing. Use the tools that you have at your disposal, but figure out what can we automate as far as the admin work here. Because again, this work is important, but I also recognize we're not just sitting around doing nothing. We've got a lot on our plate. The third thing here is, can you use in-app to change the narrative, right? Like, can you help it to help with the use cases to understand workflow management? So for example, in-app guides are fantastic, but oftentimes, right, you log into a platform and it's like, let me show you this and this and this and this. And then it's like, oh, okay. I'm like product overwhelmed by just features and you're just speaking at me. But what if your in-app guides were designed by the workflows tied to customer goals and objectives? Now, not specific to them, but every product has specific things that they solve for. Create workflows that allow you to solve for those things. So if you see a customer doing something in your platform, maybe it alerts them and says, that's great. Hey, Jeff, did you know that if you do X, Y, and Z next, you'll be able to help your customers achieve A, B, and C? Like, there are cool ways that you can architect your in-app guides so that they follow those use cases instead of it just being used for feature and functionality or being reactively there if they click on the little exclamation point or the little caution sign, right? That's not what I'm talking about. How do you architect it so that it's guiding them along these use cases? So these are a couple examples. And again, I don't have access to every cool product out there that are doing disruptive things to help automate and drive some of this. But what I want to do is spark some creativity in each of you, right? Get you to think about what is possible because the possibilities are endless. All right, the next thing up, nobody loves this, but we got to talk about it. Supporting documents and resources. Nobody wants to sit around creating docs all day. I will tell you, if you use things like Scribe, this is not sponsored by Scribe, I will just talk about it. If you use Scribe, Scribe is a fantastic tool for creating all of these types of documents. They're great for knowledge bases and things like that, but really easy to kind of click, and then it curates, it writes out your content, creates videos. It's amazing, the power of that tool. But you're going to need content to support what you do. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to ask you is, what is the content that you need to create versus what can be repurposed? The reality is, unless you are a startup and you opened the doors like, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, you probably have some content. So what do you have in place today and how can it be repurposed? Now, this could be your knowledge base, and how do you seed some of that tactically, but to support the narrative, like I said, right around use cases. What do you have that you can use today versus what do you need to create? The next thing you need to think about is, what's the best type of content for this stage? Now, when I say stage, I mean this stage around change management. Now, it could be written, it could be video, it could be presentation based, right? So are there templates of things that you can create once and reuse over and over? We have decks that we use in our onboarding, right? Obviously, the conversation is tailored and very bespoke to each customer, but the visuals that we use and the story arc is pretty much the same, but how we answer questions, how we ad lib and add value and context is very specific to each of our customers based on who they are, where they are, and what they're doing. What resources can you create that you can use over and over again? And then what are the different types of content? Now, don't forget, everyone learns differently. Just because you love video doesn't mean everyone loves video. Maybe you like reading long pages of notes because you like to step-by-step guide. Not everyone likes that. Now, I'm not saying you have to create 15 iterations of every piece of content, but you do need to be thinking thoughtfully about what is the appropriate way to design this content in a way that's going to help us achieve these goals, drive change for our customers. And the last thing is like, this is the easy stuff, but these pre-written email templates, guides, instructions, case studies are really helpful too. Case studies I actually think are super useful because if you could have a customer talk about how they did the very thing that you're telling these customers to do and they saw success, greater buy-in, right? Again, it's that social proof that everyone is looking for. So think about what you have, think about what needs to be created, but all of this is going to be really important in helping you guys drive that change. But again, I cannot stress this enough. This content is not the same as your onboarding content. It is not the same as your knowledge base. So it is not a like, let me take this and use it here. It's how do I take that and evolve it in a way that it helps us achieve these objectives? And these objectives are going to be slightly different. Sorry, my mouse is working really slow today, guys. Okay. All right. So what can you start to do today? Because I do think it's important for you to think about this. This is work that we need to be doing. This really should not be optional. I'm calling this out because I see so many organizations just managing that adoption stage of their customer journey very reactively, very poorly. Again, we have customer success managers who are still doing check-ins with their customers. They show up with no agenda, no structure to the conversation. They're just using it to follow up on support tickets. They're just using it to talk about the product roadmap. Those are not good ways to leverage the time you have with your customers, especially not in the days and weeks and months following onboarding. Okay, there's a time and place for that stuff. I'm not saying that by no means can you cover it. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm just saying if that is the only way that you're using your time and this is not the primary objective for those conversations, we are not doing it well. So things that I would like to prompt you to just go back to your offices and think about your offices, maybe just your desk, maybe it's just when you get off here. But the first one is, what does successful product usage look like? Now, again, I don't care about basic things. Like it's not about, are they logging in? I don't care. I can have my customers log in every day and not get value from my solution. Okay. What are they doing in your product that suggests that this is integrated into their workflow and that there is without a doubt no way that they could not get value, right? It's integrated in how they do their business. That's the first thing. Now, like I said, we use ChatGPT to do this deep analysis. There are plenty of ways you can go get that data, get access to it. It doesn't need to be beautiful. Get raw data, pump it into a BI tool, put it into a ChatGPT, anonymize your data. Please don't ever put anything into the free version where there could be some data and security, privacy issues. Don't do that. But use the tools that you have to go deep into that. The next thing, does your current program support change management? Go and ask this question. If we know now what this strong adoption looks like, and it's not just the features and functionality, right? It's not those basic metrics. If we really know what that looks like, does your current program support the ability to help your customers get there? Now, it could be minimal augmentation, right? But if your current program is not designed intentionally around that, this is what we need to go revisit. Think about who is equipped to lead this initiative. We cannot just assume also that CSMs, because they sit in the seat, that they know how to drive change management. This also might require some training enablement of your staff. Just because somebody sits in a seat that has a similar title to the one I'm describing today doesn't mean that they have the skills to do this work. I think that's something else that's lost on a lot of people, right? We can't expect them that they're masters at change management if they've never done that before. So maybe there is some training enablement that's required to help them get up to speed to understand what change management looks like and how they should be responsible for orchestrating it. But figuring out who's equipped to lead it is going to be important. And then lastly, What can you do differently tomorrow? Again, the call here wasn't like go reorganize how your team is structured, go hire more resources, go buy more technology. None of that is a requirement for you to do something different to see a different result. What I am asking you to do though is have different conversations with your customers that are intentional about driving true adoption. Okay? Different than what happens in onboarding. And we need to talk about them differently because they are different. In fact, like I said, majority of our customer journeys suggest that they are different, even based on the nomenclatures that we use on our customer journeys. We've got onboarding, we've got adoption, right? You've got these commercial motions, you've got advocacy. You have an entire stage dedicated to adoption. That stage should not just look like check-ins, EBRs, support follow-up. That is not what that is. Okay? That is not adoption management. This is, and it requires change. So you've got to think about it differently. Okay, so all that to be said, that brings us to some time for Q&A. I've left 10 minutes for us today. That is a record for me, I think. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to grab a sip of my tea if that's okay, and we'll get to some questions. Again, please, if you've got any questions about anything that we talked about today, I do ask that you just drop it into the Q&A. I'm not going to be scrolling through the chat, so if you want me to answer something, just drop it in there and I will be happy to get to it. Okay. All right, we've got a few questions here. So we're going to get through these. And then, like I said, any questions you guys have about this or any of these types of initiatives, I'm happy to answer. So please drop them in. So the first one here is, how do you recommend handling situations where leadership says time to value is the priority, but measures teams on metrics like days to launch? What's worked to align around customer outcomes that reflect real long-term customer outcomes? That is such a great question. And that's probably something that we're all challenged with, right? So here's the first thing. I think we all need to do is get clarity around leadership that says, okay, time to value. Usually what they mean is that they want to have something where your customer can see an immediate win, right? Something that is proof to them that if I do more of this, I will see better results. So typically in onboarding, the focus should be around a couple little quick wins. Let's use the example of an email marketing platform, right? You might have bought this email marketing platform because you want to be driving regular campaigns that drive customer loyalty, engagement, and ultimately revenue. Those are some big goals. And you might say, I need to increase revenue by 15%. I need to increase sales on my website by 15%. You're not going to be able to meet that goal in onboarding. But what you could do, right, is get your first email set up, sent out, and start engaging your audience to be able to see, hey, look, we've got this amount of click-through rate, and we see that with some A/B testing, we were able to convert $1,000 from this email campaign. That is proof that this works, okay? That is what most organizations are striving for, okay? And that's what this, like, we need to prove that quickly. Yes, absolutely. You want to be able to prove that quickly because that's how you get buy-in. We have proved to our customer that if we do the thing that our platform said it could do, that it would start to drive incremental results, right? And that over time, we should be able to achieve their goals. But under no circumstances should the expectation be that we're going to achieve our customer's end goal in onboarding. See the difference? So yes, there needs to be a time to value. So you're going to need to figure out in onboarding, what are those quick, meaningful wins? What is something that is going to provide your customers with social proof that shows them if you keep doing this work, you're going to see value. You're going to get to the outcome. You're going to get to the goal. That's what we're talking about in onboarding. When you reframe it that way, you can then say to your customers and to your internal teams, right? Like more importantly, we need to be helping our customers a little bit longer to keep them on track so that way they can continue to do these things regularly till it becomes second nature to them. And then we can lead them to their own devices. But we got to keep working with them so that we can continue to see these behavioral shifts that we know that they will continue to do this over time, so they will ultimately hit their goal. Because let's be honest, we're not consultants. We are not managed services. So we can't do the work for our customers and we can't stay with them forever. But our goal should be to stay with them long enough so that they can be successful on their own, right? It's like a kid riding a bike for the first time and you're getting ready to take off the training wheels. You don't just let go of the back of their seat and pray, right? Maybe you take one training wheel off. You leave the other one while they're getting their balance. Maybe you take both off and you hold the back of their seat while they're riding along, right? Eventually you can let go and eventually they're going to be able to ride on their own. That's what I'm talking about here. So I think the best way I could say this is to align with your leadership to make sure that you're clear on what that first time to value looks like and then what change management looks like and how we have to orchestrate that. That was the longest response to that question, but hopefully at least that gave some context into maybe a way to reframe it and have that discussion. Okay, next one here. Are you doing this for every customer? Only certain segments. We do something similar, but only for the enterprise and strategic space, and is typically easier to get the customer on board for these more regular touch points. Okay, so that's a great question also. Maybe to start, you don't start with all of your segments, right? And that could just be a few things. One, I am a big fan, if you've ever attended any of my sessions, I love to trial and test things. So I love the idea of starting with one segment to see if this works and then be able to scale it, right? Roll it out to all of your customers. So I'm not opposed to starting with a segment. I think this is where you can build the internal proof that the program works. The second thing to consider is, can we make the investment? Now, human capital is expensive, right? Your employees are the most expensive investment you'll have at the highest, greatest spend in a company, right, is your payroll. So I understand that we can't just throw people at these problems. So there might be this time and place where we need to figure out, okay, how do we scale this? That's why I offered some of those ideas around automation. How do we use technology to support it? It doesn't, I think initially I like the idea of having one-to-one because I need to learn what works and what doesn't. And then once you learn what works and what doesn't, you can replicate it and you can figure out how to scale it. I don't ever just jump to scale because what are you scaling, right? If you don't have proof that something works, you cannot scale it. It doesn't make sense. So for me, I love the idea of starting one-to-one to just understand what are the appropriate conversations, what lands, what doesn't, what do we have to work on? What are the right metrics to track? What's the right narrative? All of those things I think are important. So I think that's one thing to consider is just like, yes, I get you start with certain segments require that level of investment. Now, here's the interesting thing. I don't know if you're seeing it, but oftentimes the smaller customers, the ones that spend less than maybe our larger customers, they're the ones that struggle the most. And they're the ones that actually need the investment. Now, I'm not saying, again, the human investment is the right approach there. Again, this is where scale, tools, digital transformation is really important. But I think to ignore the segment that probably needs your help the most feels to me counterintuitive unless you are prepared to just maintain a high churn percentage in that cohort. If I know that my smaller customers are the ones that need me, they're not making the investment, but they churn at a highest rate, do I want to keep those? Are they even our right ICP? That's a whole nother question, but trying to figure out what the right investment is over time. So that's how I would approach that with like moving down segment. And the last point that you had here is like customers might be on board for the more regular touch points. If you set expectations day one, so you go into that kickoff, or even in sales is talking about it, that we have onboarding and then we have post-onboarding, which is focused on change management. If you set the stage day one, you have a higher likelihood of keeping that engagement beyond onboarding. Those regular touch points will just be expected because you set that expectation sooner. So that's the other point that I would just say about that. We could probably do one more question here. So what soft skills trainings do you recommend for teams that are not prepared yet? Where would you start? Honestly, there's a lot of content out there on change management and how to orchestrate that. I love just honestly going to YouTube. I find that there's so many courses and there's things for everybody there. It's a free university. So I honestly would find some really great content to start on, like, what is change management? What does good change management look like? Lay the foundation of what it is that you're talking about it. And then I'd probably introduce some like group internal sessions once everyone has that context and we're all on the same page. Talk about what that practically means in your business, in the context of your product with your customers, and do some lunch and learns, do a half day training session with your teams. I would say you definitely have to make those investments so that everyone understands the work to be done why they're doing it, and then how to do it effectively. This does take time also, right? You can't just hit a switch tomorrow and say, great, everyone in my organization is going to be responsible for change management, and here's what we're going to do. You do have to enable them, you do have to coach them through it, and you have to make it really contextual for them, right? They have to understand how the work that they're expected to do connects to the objectives of the business. And more importantly, not just the objectives of the business, but the objectives that your customers have for your business. So those would be the places that I would start. Like I said, lots of stuff that's available out there, but you got to give it to them through the lens of why we're doing this work, why it's important, and what are the outcomes it's going to generate. Okay, I think we've gotten through all of the questions that I had today. But if there is one more, happy to try to answer it quickly. But otherwise, we are almost at time. So what I will do is just prepare ourselves and say goodbye. And if there's another question that comes through, feel free to message me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat more about this. This is a meaty, meaty topic. Probably could be done really, really in depth in several hours, not 60 minutes, but I do try to cram as much as possible in the hour that we have. So let me just leave you all by saying thank you so much for gifting me your time. It's not lost on me how little of it we all have. So for you to give me an hour, it's not lost on me. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that we could be here together today. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully there's something, at least one thing you could take away with you coming out of this conversation, maybe even just a reframing of how we support our customers moving forward. Hopefully just a little bit of change goes a long way in your business. But again, thank you so much. We're going to have more webinars coming up. Stay tuned and we hope to see you at the next one. Thanks so much, guys.